Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kyle Stevens, and I'm chairman of the Board of Water Resources for this year. And we welcome you that are participating. We have a couple of board members that are not able to be with us in person today. A couple of them are out with illnesses, but we welcome those that are in person. Myself, Kyle Stevens, Norm Johnson, and Wayne Anderson. Those that are participating virtually, board members are Blaine Ibsen and Jim Lemon. Juliet Tennant will be joining us in progress, and we expect some participation from Charles Holmgren and possibly Randy Crozier. So again, we just welcome you here. We're conducting this meeting under some unusual circumstances where we're still dealing with COVID issues, and but we'll do the best that we can and appreciate the accommodations, appreciate staff for all the work that they've done in putting this together, technical staff for enabling us to be able to conduct meetings in this manner as well. So with that, I'm going to turn the time to Candace Hossenjager, the director, for some staff introductions, and then we'll go from there.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, I wanted to just recognize all of our water resources staff that makes this possible. So super grateful for them. And that includes Lindsay Russell, who's our master minute taker and admin assistant, make sure everything gets done there. We have the Deputy Director, Joel Williams, Rachel Shilton, Grant Doty, Stephen McGregorson, Randy Staker, who will, I think, be managing our public comments, Michael Sanchez, Eric Dixon, and Wendy Crother are all in the room. And then online, we have Jaqueline Pacheco, Russell Hadley, Shannon McLeod, Shalane DiBernardi, Marisa Egbert, and I think that may be everyone who's online unless I miss somebody. I think that is all.
Todd Stoney. Todd
Thank
Stoney
you.
here.
Todd Stoney. He joined. Thank you, Todd, and thank you, Shalane.
Not sure if you got Ben Marett. Russell's actually not here, but Ben Marett is.
Oh, great. Thank you, Ben Marett. I appreciate that clarification. So very grateful for all of our staff. And then first off, I did just want to welcome some new additions to our water resources family. In the room with us is Grant Doty. He is a new engineer in our River Basin Planning section. Rachel, would you introduce Grant for us?
So that's all I had to say was that Grant's a new engineer in my section. He'll be working on a number of projects, and we probably won't interact with you as much as the funding section does, but I will let Grant introduce himself.
Nice to meet you all. My name is Grant Doty. I'm from Utah. I love this land that we have here in the state, and I'm passionate about protecting our water resources so that we can continue to enjoy it and future generations can too. So excited to be here with you all.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Grant. I think that was a reference to some university.
Grant is a University of Utah graduate.
Great. Thank you. And then we have one new additional staff person that we want to introduce. Shannon Clow is our new administrative assistant. Todd Stoney, will you introduce Shannon for us, and then she can take some time too?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Shannon Clow comes to us from the South Salt Lake Police Department and a long career with in criminal justice. And she was a records person there at the police department for the last 4 years. But we are super excited to have her. And also, one more thing, she was born in rural Utah. I went to high school at Paiute High School. Is that correct, Shannon?
Yeah.
In Junction, Utah. So she's got some great background in Utah, and we're so happy to have her with us. Shannon, do you want to introduce yourself and a little bit more about you to the board?
You bet. I think you pretty much covered everything. I have 20 years in law enforcement and criminal justice. I am a Southern Utah girl, Paiute County. And so I know a lot about water down there, believe it or not. And every reservoir, every lake, I spent every summer in Lake Powell or from Circleville, Wayne County to Moab. I'm excited to learn more and be in all these meetings. I appreciate you inviting me. Thanks.
Thank you all. And that's all I have for right now, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Candace. Again, I just wanted to, as you can tell, I'm probably a little bit nervous conducting this, my first meeting, but wanted to get back to expressing thanks to Blaine Ibsen, who had served as chairman of the board for the past 2 years. And obviously part of that time was under some critical conditions with the COVID and a lot of the meetings being conducted virtually, which when we met with, I had the opportunity to meet with staff last week and just kind of review things and what the expectations were for me as chairman, and wondering whether or not we would have to conduct meetings virtually, and lo and behold, here we are. So we'll do the best that we can. But Blaine, thank you for your past service as chairman, and as I mentioned to the staff last week when I met with them, that from my perspective, I thought you did a yeoman's job in conducting the meetings under those extenuating circumstances. So thank you. I just wanted to express appreciation to the rest of the board also for having the vote of confidence for me to serve as a chairman. This coming year, we will be facing a lot of critical issues in the water community. I can't imagine what's going on up on the Hill with legislation and the number of bills that are being introduced relative to addressing our drought issues and the concerns associated with it. But I know that we have a very capable staff that will keep tabs on that and keep us updated as time moves on. I just wanted to mention also that I've had the opportunity serving on the board here for the past couple of years as representing the board on the Ag Optimization Water Task Force that was created under legislation a couple of years ago and has been going since 2018. And so I've been the board representative on that particular task force. And I've also been the board representative on the Community Impact Board. The way the statute is currently written, it states that the chairman of the board or their designee will be the representative on the board. And so when Norm Johnson became chairman, he asked me, him living in Blanding and a long ways away, and they meet on a monthly basis, asked me if I'd be willing to serve on that on the Community Impact Board as the Board of Water Resources representative, and I indicated to him that I would, and so I've had that opportunity the last 4 years, I guess, as being the representative on that particular board. So with that, just additional brief introduction, we'll go ahead and go through the agenda items. I forget in this new book that we're trying to take advantage of space and have them back to back. So rather than fumbling through it, I just had to turn the page. So first of all, help me out here, Candace, if I'm...
Yeah, so the first agenda item is or the second agenda item on our briefing meeting is to discuss the board agenda items. So we normally just kind of walk through the agenda.
Okay, so the agenda there, the first one is the committal of funds application, which is RE 438, Midway Irrigation Company. That would be, oh, Wayne, that's in your area. So if you, is there anything that you'd like to say there, or Marisa?
I think that all the preliminary things have been taken care of. It's just a matter of us approving the funds so they can go ahead.
Marisa, are you here or is she virtual?
I am on virtual.
Anything you need to add there?
Nope, just that nothing has changed. They are ready to go. Quite a while ago when this started, we talked to them. I know Candace has a great question. We talked to them about whether or not they wanted to wait for some of the grant funds. And because there was so many unknowns on timing, they said no, they wanted to just proceed. So they've got all the things done, all the legalities and things turned in that they needed. And so they will be ready to go once they get committed and a contract going.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I also had that same question, wondering whether or not they would want to take advantage of the grant funds, but apparently not. And then as to the grant funds, review with us again. Those are eligible for counties of the first and second class.
Yes,
And so Wasatch County would meet the qualifications for a second class.
that is true. Yeah.
Okay.
So in 2021, the legislature passed the Secondary Metering Act that provided some grant funds to the division or to the Board of Water Resources to distribute at a 50-50 cost share, but it was only applicable to first and second class counties at that time.
Okay. All right. So Wayne, you'll be prepared to make a motion
Yes, I am.
on that one. Okay. Okay, then the next agenda item is Peoa South Bench Canal and Irrigation Company. This happens to be in my area, so someone else would need to make the motion for me. I reviewed it. Again, this is one that's had a lot of moving parts in it. They've come back to the board for an increase in funding because of increased costs, because of a little bit of change in scope. And so I know staff has worked diligently with the board members there with the Peoa South Bench to get things in order. So Jaqueline, do you have anything else to add to that one?
No, Mr. Chairman, they're just coming before the board, like you said, because they need additional funds because they've expanded the scope previously, and then now they need those additional funds because one of their grants was reduced, and they need it in order to be able to complete the project.
Okay, and then I know there's been some email exchanges. Is Sam Turpin and Dave Lake planning on being participating via virtual with the board meeting later this afternoon?
With Sam, I didn't get confirmation if he was going to be there in person. I think he will most likely be virtual, as well as Dave, the president, and their engineer, Brian Dieter, will also be available virtually in case the board has any technical questions.
Okay. Is there one of the board members that would be willing to okay, Norm has indicated he would be willing to make that motion. Okay, thank you, Jaqueline, for all your hard work. And I know you and Shalane have spent a lot of time in putting that together, so thank you. The next item on the agenda would be RL 585, which is Powder Mountain Water and Sewer District. Again, this is one that's had a lot of moving parts, maybe more so than the one we just talked about with Peoa. And you'll recall that at the last board meeting, there was quite a bit of discussion relative to this particular project, and there was a request made as a part of the project to consider some additional type of funding. And because the board members and staff, it was a last minute type request, did not feel comfortable with moving forward with any further discussion and consideration of that one. And so I actually made a motion to table this motion. And if we follow Robert's Rules of Order, in order for us to further discuss it when we come to the board meeting, the first course of action will need to be a motion to untable the action from the previous board meeting and then open it up for discussion. So I'll need to have someone that will make that motion to untable and consider further discussion for the motion. Charles, I see you're online. Would you be willing to make that motion to untable?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I will make that motion when we get to it. Once I get all this technology worked out, geez. That and
Well,
COVID.
we're right. That and COVID. Okay. Well, we're glad that you're able to participate with us virtually, and hope things go well for you that way.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So Charles will make the motion to untable. Then we'll open it up for discussion. And Ben, I'll turn the time to you to help us answer any questions or bring up anything that you may need to relative to this particular application.
All right, thanks, Mr. Chairman. So yeah, as Chairman Stevens mentioned in the last board meeting, there was some discussion on the Powder Mountain project. If the board will recall, just really briefly, they're installing a spring box, they're constructing 2 booster pump stations, they're rehabilitating 2 booster pump stations, and installing approximately 4,000 feet of distribution pipe. I don't plan on doing another construction update simply because we had this project before the board at the last meeting. But the applicant this will be a second bond for the same project. And the applicant has requested that the board approve a 90-10 cost split simply due to financial hardship that they're going through. And it was tabled because of a miscommunication on the way that the bond was supposed to be structured, but also because they did make that request and we weren't prepared to provide numbers for that. However, for this meeting today, we are prepared to provide numbers for the request that they are going to make. And the request that they are going to make will be, like I said, a 90-10 cost share with the board. And the way that that will work out is that the old bond and the new bond will average together. So the new bond will actually be a 95-5 cost split. And then that combined with the old bond, which is in an 85-15, will average out to 90-10. I hope that's clear. I hope I didn't confuse anybody. But they will make that request today at the meeting. I believe that's all. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to clarify that.
From the board members, then, are there any questions for Ben relative to what he has just explained to us?
Mr. Chair, this is Blaine. Just so I'm clear, there are 2 proposed motions under the repayment terms. The first one would be just the standard. The second one would be if they ask for the 90-10. Now, there was questions on the bonding and all that. Shalane, are you comfortable with the 90-10, the way that motion is now then?
Yes. So yeah, we've kind of tried to get everything in there saying the existing bond won't be changed. We'll just do everything with the new bond. But if the board agrees to a 90-10 overall split, then yeah, the 2 motions, one is staff recommendation to go along with the standard guidelines, funding the same as what's already been funded. And the second is for the applicant's request. And yeah, I think we're okay with the 90-10 split, which means they'll be getting 95% of the new project. But I think we're okay with that, knowing it's 90-10 of the overall project cost. And those numbers we've got in there, those were calculated by us. That was not provided by them. That was calculated by us.
So, Shalane, do we anticipate any difference coming from them relative to the numbers that you've provided and what they might have? They should be the same.
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think we expect anything different. I think Ben's spoken to them I think they are just prepared to make that request again for 95% of the additional project costs, which will come out to a 90% overall cost share from the board. I don't think they would have any different repayment schedule. And I think they're happy that we're recommending 30 years. So I don't expect them to ask for anything other than that.
So again, just for clarification, of the two motions that are in the book, the first one is what the board is recommending, absent their request for a 90-10 split. If the board agrees with the 90-10 split, then the second motion would be the appropriate motion to make. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, that is correct.
And again, this is one that is in my area. Is there a board member that would be willing to make the motion after we have that discussion with them, determining which course of action the board chooses to take? Blaine, would you be willing to make that motion?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Now, with that, prior to any of that, Charles was going to make the motion to untable it also. So the untable would be first, and then
Correct.
And then I'd be happy to make that other motion. Yes.
Yeah, then Charles will untable it. Then we'll have the discussion, the presentation.
Right.
They'll make their request and then turn to you for a motion.
Okay, I'd be happy to.
Okay. All right. Well, again, Ben, thank you for all your hard work on this, and Shalane as well. These are, again, kind of extenuating circumstances, and we appreciate all the extra time and effort that you've put in helping to keep us in compliance with the board guidelines and the statutes and such, and at the same time, trying to accommodate the needs of those individuals that are providing the necessary water. So thank you. Okay. The next item on the agenda then would be the contract water bank report.
Yes, and just to let you know, Mr. Chair, we do have two folks with us today, Susan Belagamba and Nathan Bracken, who are here if you have any questions or any concerns.
Okay.
I think Jaqueline's going to give the report on this one.
Okay, Jaqueline, we'll go ahead and turn the time to you to kind of brief us and then open it up for any questions.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I'm excited to be presenting this first water bank application at the meeting today. The intent of the contract water bank report is to show that the applicant has met all of the requirements under the Utah Water Banking Act. And my presentation will essentially be reviewing this report in a public setting. I will go through the purpose. I apologize if you can hear my baby in the background.
That's okay.
So I will be covering the purpose and the process that the applicant has gone through, talking about the location of the bank. I will review the parties of the contract to the water bank, and then I will give you a list of the activities that have taken place for them to be able to get the approval from their board, as well as the participating parties. And then I will give you a general operating timeline and procedures for the bank and make a recommendation to the board for them to approve the water bank. I can go into more detail at the meeting, but if you guys have any questions, please let me know.
Mr. Chairman, actually, I've got one point of clarification.
Mr. Chairman, this is Blaine. I have a question for Jaqueline.
Okay, Blaine, if you'll just hold that for a second.
Okay.
We have a point of clarification from, and apologize for not remembering the name,
Wendy Crowther.
Wendy Crowther, in addition to what Jaqueline just presented. So then if you'll hold that, then we'll go to your question.
And Jacqueline, I apologize that I did not call you about this morning. I got tied up in another meeting, and so I apologize. I'm dropping you on this a little bit. And it's a very minor point of clarification, but on the report under parties to the contract water bank, it identifies the Price River Watershed Conservation District as the applicant, and then it identifies the parties separately. And I think it should just be clarified that Price River Watershed Conservation District as the applicant is also a party to the contract. And just clarify that slightly there.
Thank you.
Okay, but the name of the water bank is the Carbon Canal Company Water Bank.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, it's just a little bit unclear on who the parties were, because it should include the Price River Watershed Conservation District as a party and the applicant.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, Blaine, now we'll turn it to you.
Oh, okay. I noticed just down on here on the water rights, it said after this is approved, they'll file change applications. Any rough idea on time frame with that? I would assume the change application is probably prepared and ready to file, but any anticipated time frame on getting approval for that or whatever? Jacqueline?
I think it might take a couple of months. They're intending on having, the goal would be to have this operating and ready to go this spring.
Yeah, and Blaine, I would add, I think that they've mentioned they've been working with the state engineer's office to come up with change applications to be filed as soon as possible. And yeah, they are hoping to operate this year with or without an official contract in place. They're hoping to be able to at least try to do something. And Wendy, I thank you for your clarification, and would just like to note that in the slideshow Jacqueline it is made clear that the Conservation District is one of the parties to the contract, even if it's not in the report. So thanks for that.
So will these be temporary change applications or a permanent change application? I'm assuming temporary change applications year to year.
Nathan is going to address that issue.
Yes, Nathan Bracken. I'm here on behalf of the Nature Conservancy, but also the coalition of folks that worked on this. So we do have a draft change application. We're waiting for some maps. We will get that filed as soon as we can. Whether or not that'll be approved in time for the spring, we don't know, but we should be up and running by next year. And to answer the other question, these under the water bank, all water banks they can't be longer than 10 years. And in this case, the act is set to sunset unless the legislature extends it in 2030. So yes, these will be temporary change applications without getting in the nuances of it. They aren't going to be permanent, but this is going to be, I think, up until 2030, and then they would have to be renewed.
So Nathan, again, just for clarification for my purposes, then they're temporary that will coincide with the length of the water bank process itself.
Yes, exactly. And the Water Bank Act was intended to be a 10-year pilot effort in which we are going to see how these banks work, study them. Candace is going to report each year to the legislature, and we're going to make tweaks and changes. And then at the end of the 10-year period, the legislature will determine whether to keep this concept, to tweak it, or extend it. And so because of that nature, the banks themselves cannot be permanent. They're all going to be, the more correct term would be a fixed time change, meaning that they can be more than 1 year, but they can't be more than 2030 at this point.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Any other questions from board members?
Mr. Chairman.
Charles, you have,
Charles.
Go ahead.
Just a question, I guess, for Nathan or Jaqueline, but I see that these are all outside groups. Had a shareholder within Carbon Canal Company wanted to lease water, could they have been doing that all along without this permission?
No, not no. They can lease water amongst themselves, but they can't lease water to the lessees in this contract without it being part of a water bank. That's the difference.
Yes, I just assumed that they could lease within their own company and not not individually outside. So I just wanted that clarification that they still had that potential within the shareholder group.
Yes, absolutely. And with any irrigation company, the shareholders, and I think your company being one of probably one of the best examples, have really good internal company markets in which it can go ag to ag. But the point of a water bank is to allow the water to go from, say, ag to in-stream use or ag to another use, but then back into ag. We've done a really good job of doing ag to something else and never having it come back to ag. The idea with this is that it could be temporarily used for other uses and then come back to the farmers.
Thank you, Nathan.
Any other questions from the board or staff? Okay, Jaqueline, we'll look forward to that presentation and discussion. Again, don't need to remind the board members of this from the standpoint of this is the first application that the board will be considering. And again, thank you, staff, for all of your work in putting this together and bringing this information to the board. Okay, the next item on the agenda for our board meeting this afternoon will be RE 455, which is a new application from Uintah Water Conservancy District. Ben, anything that do we discuss new applications? We just make them a item of business, or
Yeah, it's just more informational to the board.
Okay, so that'll be one that'll be coming forth in the future.
Mr. Chair, we did miss one item of the approval of minutes and the NRCS snow survey report, which we don't have to do anything with that. That is more informational, but I wonder about the approval of minutes on.
Thank you. I'm glad someone's here to help keep me on track for the first time. So let's go back to that item. Were there any issues in the minutes that need to be brought to our attention? Charles, you have a raised hand. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, on the list of those present at the general meeting, on the others present, Nathan Bracken is listed as being from Clyde Snow when he is actually from Smith Hartfigson on the others present. And then down where it goes to Stephen Wood, Sunrise Engineering, Tom Griffin was also there from West Cache Canal Company. I think those were the only two things I noted that weren't included in the minutes correctly.
Okay, so who else was in addition to Stephen Wood?
Tom Griffin, he was a board member from West Cache Canal Company.
Okay. So Lindsay, have
It's
you
West
got those?
Cache Irrigation, but thank you.
Yes, sorry about that.
No, thank you, Charles.
You're welcome.
Yeah, he is on the list. Tom Griffin from West Cache Irrigation.
He's right below Nathan Bracken. You're on mute, Charles.
Next to Stephen Wood. Stephen Wood was the engineer for West Cache Irrigation. And Tom Griffin was the board member present at that meeting.
Right, and she mentioned, we're just pointing out that Tom Griffin's name is right below Nathan Bracken on the list of attendees.
Yeah, there he is. Boy, well, so much for eyesight on my part. Never mind
Well,
me.
at least it's an indication that someone is reading the minutes, so thank you.
Yeah. Read them, can't see them.
Lindsay, do you have those corrections then? Okay. All right, anything else we need to discuss on the minutes? I apologize for skipping over those. Okay, seeing none then, we'll go to the next agenda item, and that is approval of the ARPA funds application and updated rules. Joel Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the board folder, I've included the updated application. I had some good suggestions from our chairman, Kyle Stevens, of some improvements. One of them was widening the box for someone to enter an email address. Before I agree, it would have been really hard to get a regular email address in there. Eliminating a couple of other boxes that maybe were pertinent on some of the board's other applications that are in rural areas. For example, the distance and direction and distance from the nearest community, because sometimes we do have projects that are out away from established communities, but all of these secondary metering applications will be in established towns and cities. So we've gone through and made Kyle's suggestions, but I did want to give the board an opportunity to point out any other suggestions they might have as they've looked at both the application and the proposed rules, and we could entertain any additional changes or questions.
Thank you, Joel. Board members, do you have any further comments or suggestions or issues relative to the proposed rule and or application? Okay. Seeing none, Joel, thank you, and we'll be prepared. Oh, excuse me, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, what page is that on again, or where is that in the board book?
The book that I'm looking from doesn't have page numbers on it, but it's right after the application summary for the new application, Uintah Water Conservancy District.
Okay, thank you.
If you're looking at the old board book, I'm not sure if it's the same sequence or not.
I think it would be included in the board folder that Lindsay emailed out at about 4:50 on Tuesday of this week. Would be the one that included that. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, seeing no further questions on that agenda item, we'll then move to the next one, and that is a new automated reservoir storage application. And Tom Moore. Tom, are you on?
I don't believe Tom's on, but that is our planning report that we've tried to do for the board. But he'll go over the new reservoir application he's developed to pull reservoir data and the map that it creates. So it'll be an informational item to the board at the board meeting.
Okay.
All right. Director or Chairman?
Yes.
Chairman, this is Blaine. On both of those previous ones, you'll need motions too, I'm assuming, the water banking application and the approval of the ARPA. I'm assuming they'll want motions and approval of both of those items. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That is correct. And thank you, Mr. Former Chairman, for helping me recognize my mistake. So back to the water banking application. We will need a motion there. Norm Johnson, with that being in his area, will make that motion. And then on the last one we just discussed, the approval of the ARPA funds application, updated rules. Blaine, would you be willing to make that motion?
Yes, I can do that. Is there any specific wording that you want on it, or?
Joel, I'll turn to you.
If I might, Mr. Chair, it would just be to approve the application and rules.
Okay.
So just a simple motion to approve. Okay. Again, thank you, Blaine, for calling that to our attention. Okay, we'll move to the next item, and that's the Lake Powell pipeline report. And Joel, are you making that, or Eric is?
So yes, Mr. Chair, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce Eric Dixon. As I have been transitioning into some of my new duties as Deputy Director, Eric has been involved with the Lake Powell Pipeline Project over the last year or so, and has been getting up to speed. But this is a good opportunity for him to step into a bit of a larger role and have him take over doing these presentations at each board meeting. And so I would like to give you my I guess, express my appreciation that Eric's somebody that he's a good communicator. He's a good presenter. He's very talented. He's been prior to Water Resources, he worked in a private engineering sector doing a lot of design and construction, and he's come on and helped us with the mill site project. You probably got to see him at the board tour we held down there at the dam. And so I'm glad to have his talent and expertise helping with Lake Powell Pipeline. And Eric, is there anything you'd like to say as an introduction?
I think you covered my basics pretty good. So as far as introducing me, we can get to know each other over the years. I guess we have a little bit. So glad to be here.
Well, on behalf of the board, Joel, thank you for your involvement in that. And we look forward to Eric picking up the ball and moving forward with this important project as it moves forward. Again, one of those that's has taken a lot of time and will continue to take more time in the future to move forward until it comes to fruition. So Eric, we'll let you go ahead and give us an updated report on it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your notes, you've got kind of the outline of the things I'll be going through. I'll just kind of briefly go through each of those, and then if there's any questions after, but just kind of a general update of all the main key items we're working on and progressing with right now. So
okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, we'll go over the Bureau of Reclamation, what they're doing on the supplemental draft EIS, and then go kind of a little update on the modeling, update on the team members and who's got a little more involved with it lately with the things going on with the Colorado River and that modeling. And we'll just go over some changes of the potential changes from the current administration, federal administration, update on public education outreach. We'll get update on the water rights change application, and a brief update on the basin states and the coordination going on with that. Then we got some other permits that are being worked on. I'll go over a few of those quickly. And then just the project timeline that Joel's been going over on the last few, ever since the timeline has been set up, just an update on where we are on that. And then I'll update on the contracts, where we are on each of those. So won't be much longer than that, but just go into each of those a little bit during the board meeting.
Okay, thank you. Board members, do you have any questions on any of those issues that we can approach with Eric prior to him making the official presentation in the board meeting? Okay, seeing none, then we'll look forward to your more formal presentation in the board meeting.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. Candace will be giving us a report in the board meeting, but maybe you can give us a preview of that.
Yeah, happy to give just a preview of that. Generally, I'll give you an update on the water resources plan and the status of that, where that's at, and then also the coordinated water action plan, which has been facilitated by the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget, along with the Department of Natural Resources, the Department of Environmental Quality, and the Department of Agriculture and Food. So we have been heavily involved in that and kind of go over the basics of that effort. And then I'll talk a little bit about water legislation in my director's report, but I'll have Joel in a minute give a more in-depth report for the briefing meeting, and talk about some legislative presentations that are coming up. There's also been a ton of stuff going on this month. We had the Great Salt Lake Summit. We had our kind of historic first ever Utah Watershed Council meeting. We've had the Utah Lake Summit. And then there's also a Bureau of Reclamation Drought Response Operation Agreement public webinar on the framework this Friday. And that's pretty much all I know on that so far. I can give a little bit more details. I have not seen a link to it yet, but I'll happy to send it out to the board once I do get that. But I can give you a little bit more details about that as well. So that's generally what I'll cover in my director's report.
Did you indicate Joel was going to also participate in that
I'll probably do a high level just in the director's report, but in the next item, we can have Joel go into, in this meeting, in the briefing meeting, a little bit more in-depth legislative update for all of you.
Okay, so I'm confused. Are you going to give a more updated report now or in the director's, or I mean, in the board meeting?
Now.
Now,
I'll give
okay.
one, yeah.
Okay, Joel, we'll turn the time to you then.
Happy to run through the bills we're watching. There are a lot of them this session, and I think we anticipated that this might be the case with the drought last year. It got a lot of people's attention and a lot of focus on water, which we're happy to have. And we're seeing some of the results in legislation that's being proposed. We are tracking, I'm just trying to debate in my head how much detail to go into there, because there are a lot. We have, maybe I'll just give a quick overview. So House Bill 33, which is titled In-Stream Water Flow Amendments by Representative Joel Ferry, would allow folks to, similar to what we've discussed with water banking, make it easier for people to file change applications, to be able to use, transfer agricultural water for other uses, particularly in-stream flow. Then we have House Bill 37 from Representative Stratton, amending state water policy, which would include recharge of aquifers into state water policy. So that one was a minor bill, just more of an amendment. House Bill 64, drinking water amendments. That one is mostly affecting the division of drinking water, but allowing a fee to occur for public water systems. I know there's been some debate on that one. House Bill 95, landscaping requirement prohibition. This would essentially, there's some cities that require a park strip, require you to have a front lawn, and this would propose eliminating that requirement, so that people, if they wanted to put in a water-wise landscape in their park strip or water-wise front yard, that would be an option in areas where it's currently restricted.
Excuse me, who are the sponsors of those last two?
Yes, sorry, I am moving too quick. The House Bill 64 was sponsored by Representative Christine Watkins from Price, and the House Bill 95 with the landscape requirements was Representative Ray Ward.
Okay, thank you.
Another one.
And that one did pass out of the House committee meeting, standing committee, just the Tuesday, I think.
Yep. Good point. The House Bill 115 is one that we have been involved with. It's with Representative Melissa Ballard. It is titled Water Distribution Efficiency, and it would encourage cities to locate their losses in their system, and then with the hope that by then knowing where those losses are, they could then address and hopefully fix those and save some of their water losses. We kind of call it supply side conservation. We hope that once water goes through a meter and it reaches someone's home, that the users at the home are being mindful of trying to conserve water. But some water is lost before it even gets into the system. Essentially, there could be leaks in the system, or there could be other locations where there's water that's lost, and we're encouraging cities to try to find those, and so it's been something that's been discussed for several years, and we'll continue watching that bill. It's been modified quite a few times to try to make it more palatable to some cities that might be concerned. House Bill 121 is sponsored by Representative Spendlove, titled Water Conservation Modifications. This one, we did attach a fiscal note to. There would be some impacts to the Division of Water Resources. The bill mentions us providing $5 million in incentives to homeowners to convert their turf to water-wise landscapes, and that they could do that. That the Division of Water Resources could provide that incentive to them in terms of a grant to help cover the cost of that landscape transformation. Also, realizing that it would require some staff time, we submitted a fiscal note for a full-time employee to help administer those funds. And then also some additional money to update our website, the Utah Water Savers website. As we got that website up and running to handle the toilet rebates and the sprinkler controller rebates, it cost us over $100,000 to get that website up and running. And we're thinking that it'll cost hopefully something less than that this time to add in the turf rebate component to it. And that, so the total fiscal note we submitted was $5.2 million, $5 million in the incentive that the bill mentions, and then the $200,000 to cover both a full-time employee and the technological advances to get the website up and running for this rebate program if this goes through. So there's been a substitute to this bill, but it did get a favorable recommendation, and we'll see where this ends up going. Another interesting bill is the Watershed Restoration Initiative from Representative Gabe Benyon. The WRI is one of the agencies within the Department of Natural Resources, and it's one that's looked on very favorably, where they go out to different watersheds and remove vegetation that is destructive to the watershed and do other improvements. It's been a very successful and appreciated program, but it's been placed into statute. And so this bill from Representative Benyon would put WRI into statute.
Excuse me, what was the bill number?
131.
130.
And we would be happy to provide the board with a list of all of these bills.
Oh, thank you. That would be most helpful.
There's a few of them.
And I'm skipping over a few that are not as applicable, but House Bill 168, it was sponsored by Representative Carl Albrecht, titled Preferences of Water Right Amendments. It would address preferences of water rights during a temporary water shortage or emergency, and that bill was heavily debated in the Utah Water Task Force, but has been presented to the committee this year, and we'll continue tracking that one. And let's see. Some of the new bills that have just received numbers this week. Tomorrow is the deadline for bills to receive a number to be able to be considered during this session. So I believe it was just yesterday, House Bill 232 received its number for the Utah Lake Authority. That's a lengthy bill. I think it was like 55 pages, which looks like it would work in conjunction with, but it would oversee the current Utah Lake Commission and work closely with the Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands, which, as we know, the lake bed is our state lands and would be administered by Forestry, Fire, and State Lands, but that the Utah Lake Authority would have some role in that. And so that's a long bill that we're taking some time to go through. It didn't have any fiscal impacts to Division of Water Resources, but something that we're all interested in following. Another bill that got a number this week, House Bill 242 from Representative Peterson, titled Secondary Water Metering Amendments. And the interesting thing is that it mirrors very closely the guidelines and the rules that we have talked about with you regarding the secondary metering. It would essentially be put it into code. And so we checked with our department director, Brian Steeds, wondering, should we wait and see what happens with this bill, or should we go ahead with the route that the board is doing? And we were instructed to continue with the effort we have to put the secondary metering guidelines into rule, and the board can get up and running with starting this program. We may even be able to start before this legislation would take effect. If the legislation takes effect, we can look at any potential modifications we may need to make, but they are almost word for word very, very similar. So now to a few Senate bills. We have a Senate Bill 89, water amendments from Senator Janie Iwamoto. Candace has been very involved with working with her in this bill, and it would modify some of the provisions related to water conservation plans. It was passed by the Utah Water Task Force and has been, I can't remember the status with the committee. Is it?
It hasn't been seen by the
Okay.
committee yet. We're anticipating it being on the agenda tomorrow at the Senate committee meeting, standing committee meeting. It does, mainly what it does is it requires water providers to meet the regional water conservation goals or exceed them, or if they can't, for some reasonable justification, explain why they can't meet them. So we built in a lot of flexibility there. It does give us rulemaking authority as well to develop the regional water conservation goals into the future and reevaluate them in 2030, 2040, kind of, and so on. So we'll reevaluate them every 10 years.
And I'm realizing, yeah, as Candace mentioned, I should have provided a list to all of you of all these bills and I'll make sure I'm kind of getting my feet wet here in my new duties here as a legislative liaison, and I'll make sure that for the next meeting, that you've got a list that to be able to help with reviewing these. Another one I want to mention is Senate Bill 110, Water as Part of a General Plan, sponsored by Senator Mike McKell. It would require municipalities to add a water use and preservation element as part of their municipal general plan. So every municipality has to have a general plan, and this bill would require that part of that plan have a water use or what he titled it, water use and preservation element. We're kind of realizing it's essentially a conservation element that we think is helpful for every city to take a look at that. Are there ordinances that city has that are not conducive to conservation, such as a turf requirement for in your park strip or in your lawn? And then that water resources was listed as a resource to each of these municipalities to be able to provide any advice to them on what might be good ordinances to consider. And things like that. So we have been watching that one because it also involve water resources as providing advice to these municipalities. The bill thankfully did include a fiscal note already of $300,000, which would cover a full-time employee for 3 years. And that's the implementation timetable for this bill, is that the cities would have to do this by 2025. And so over the next 3 years, we could use that funding to hire help to provide that guidance to these municipalities. And at the hearing on Thursday night, not today's Thursday, Tuesday night maybe at the Capitol, we made it clear that there were some concerns expressed about what about the rural areas of the state that maybe don't have much of a staff on, that there's one person that's kind of running everything and the water's just one of their duties. How are they going to be able to modify their general plan? And that's where we said, well, water resources could help. We like to work with the rural areas of the state, and we'd be happy to provide any help that we can in implementing this, because we think it would be helpful for water conservation in the state. So we'll see where that one goes. Senate bill.
So Joel, let me interrupt you there. Then the fiscal note that was included there was one not provided by the division, but was included as a part of the legislation when the legislation was written.
Yep, the bill sponsor included it.
Okay.
So that was good to see. Sometimes they give us things to do, but don't provide the funding. And this one asked us to help and provided the funding, which was nice.
And oftentimes they don't expect a fiscal note to be attached.
Yes.
That's just an editorial comment on my part, having been involved in that in the past. So.
And then there are a few other bills that we're watching that still don't have numbers. We've heard rumors of language, or sometimes we'll even have a bill sponsor submit something to us unnumbered and just say, hey, take a look at this. And so we've got a list of those as well. Again, they have to receive a number by the end of tomorrow to be considered in this session. And we'll keep you updated on how those go. But
There's just one I would add, Mr. Chair, and we spoke with you about it. SB 111 is a Permanent Community Impact Fund Board edits. That's not the right title, I guess, modifications, but it removes the Water Resources Board member and the Water Quality Board member from the CIB board. It also makes some additional changes by adding in additional county folks, Governor's Office of Planning and Budget representative. I think the state planner is the plan there. So that did pass committee, but just wanted you all to be aware of that.
Okay, thank you, Joel, for those updates, and any additional information you want to provide to us will be welcome, and we'll look forward to that additional discussion in the official board meeting. So, Candace, anything else?
Well, we do have some additional information for the board as part of the briefing meeting, if now's a good time to go into that.
Sure.
Okay. Joel, were you planning to do a financial report? Could you go over that real quick for us?
Yes, happy to do that. The status of funds in the front part of the board folder, the funds are doing well and looking healthy. The revolving construction fund has the funding to cover the projects we have in line, and the balance at the end of about $5 million, recognizing also that we anticipate some of the dam safety projects needing to use that. So we will probably continue to not direct too many projects into that fund right now while we work on the ones that are already slated to use those funds, and as well as the dam safety projects that we have in line. The City Water Loan Fund is one that we could entertain some additional projects. Any municipality would be eligible for this fund, and it does grow more slowly because we don't receive sales tax money into this fund. It grows just based on the repayments that continue to come in on existing projects. So, but that is one to keep in mind. The Conservation and Development Fund is the largest and is the one that receives the sales tax funds that come in each year. So you can see it has a healthy list of projects that we anticipate moving forward. And we also anticipate this year in July, we will make our final payment on the recapitalization that we did a number of years ago for the Provo Reservoir Canal enclosure project, where the board essentially committed its repayments for a period of time to be able to pay a larger amount on a project larger than the board had at the time. I believe it was about $65 million to one project. And then that board has since then been making payments by pledging some of its incoming repayments. That will end this year in July, as I mentioned. We'll make our final payment. And so that is something that we will see those funds now being able to be redirected into the Conservation and Development Fund. And so we don't have any concerns about that fund getting too low, even with some of the large projects that we know are interested in using our funds, because we do anticipate sales tax continue to increase, as well as the recapitalization money that would come in. And while I'm mentioning sales tax, there is a bill this year that would reduce the tax on food, and we anticipate a statewide impact of about $160 million in reduced revenue, sales tax revenue. And the impact to the board, we submitted a fiscal note to say the impact to us would be probably about $8.5 million in our sales tax if that bill goes forward. And I know there's a debate among legislators as to whether it should be a sales tax on food or reduced income tax, but we'll watch that one obviously as well.
Is there any effort underway to replace that loss of funding if it were to happen?
Not that we've heard of.
Okay.
Great, thanks,
Candace,
Joel.
go ahead.
Okay, so there's just a few other items. We have our next meeting scheduled on March 23rd 23rd, and it's typically held in conjunction with the Utah Water Users Workshop. So the Water Users Workshop is from March 21st through the 23rd, with the Water Law and Policy Seminar being on the 21st, and then the Water Users Workshop on the 22nd and the 23rd. Lindsay, do you mind coming up to chat a little bit about kind of some of our plan and accommodations and board meeting room?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. So as Director Candace said, our meeting is scheduled to be on March 23rd. We actually were able to schedule a room in the Dixie Convention Center, which is exciting. We don't have to travel anywhere to go. So we will be meeting in room, it's the Sunbrook room. It's A and B at 1 p.m. And so we'll have our briefing meeting and then our board meeting directly following that. And I will also be adding this into an informational packet for you as well. So be on the lookout for that.
What day is that?
And that's going to be on March 23rd. So right after,
Wednesday, right?
That's Wednesday. So right after the Water Users Conference ends, we'll just go directly to, I think there's about an hour, give or take. And we'll just go directly into that room and hold our meeting. So the Water Users Conference will be the 22nd through the 23rd. So we've secured rooms at the True by Hilton from the 21st through the 24th. So I'll be asking members of the board and also staff that are presenting and also those that are just going, what days they're planning on being there. We do need that list at the latest by February 22nd. It's very understandable that things come up, but if we could have that list by then, that would be great. Of what dates you're planning on staying and things like that. I think that is all the information that I have for you today. Do you have any questions?
Well, I just have one question relative. I know that was last year the Water Users was canceled.
Yes.
And with I know it's premature to know the answer to this, but is there any consideration of that being postponed or canceled?
That's a great question. Joel, have you heard any?
So I guess it was canceled in 2020, but it was held last year in May. It was in May instead of March. So there was that change. I have not heard of any talk of canceling the conference for March of this year.
Yeah.
So I think
I think it is something that we'll track closely and kind of
just have to keep on the radar, and depending on what the future holds here as far as COVID and such, we'll adjust accordingly.
That's true. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lindsay.
The next item is volunteers for the board tour this summer/fall. Shalane, do you want to cover that?
Sure. I just wondered if we have any volunteers. We never asked last year, towards the end of last year, who was willing. And looking at the schedule, the rotation, what it's been, it looks like it's actually time for the Provo River Basin. Wayne, if you're willing to host us, we'll get a staff member assigned and figure something out.
That sounds like I'm committed.
Well, you're not. If it's a no, then we'll move on. Bear River and Charles would be next. We can just keep going down the list if you want, but.
No, we'll be happy to try and help put something together down there. There's a lot going on, and there are probably some things of a lot of interest, especially with the rebuild on the reservoir and some of those kinds of things.
Right.
There should be some really interesting things that we can come up with. So.
Perfect. Well, that's great. Then my next question to the board is August a good time? Would you prefer September? Is there any preference? August 4th or September 15th is when the meetings are scheduled for.
This Wayne, I probably lean towards September because it's a little cooler. Well, we meet in August. It's pretty hot. And
right.
I think it'd be nicer to be a little more comfortable.
Shalane,
okay. And
question. So it looks,
Sure.
is it our board meetings on the 15th of September? So we typically would do this on the 14th. Is that correct?
14th. Yes, that's correct.
Well, that would be good for me. I don't know what the rest of the board, how they feel, but
Well, no
I
one's
think
jumping in to object, Wayne.
I can see that, but they're certainly not running over me to take over.
Okay, well then I think we'll put on the calendar that we'll plan a tour of Wayne's area on September 14th. We'll put that on your calendar, and if something changes, we'll let you know. Thank you.
Thank you, Shalene. And then just finally, I just wanted, Joel and I have had a lot of conversations this last little week or so trying to figure out how best to provide information to the board as far as the board books and the timing of them. And so one, we definitely want to meet expectations, and two, we definitely want to make sure you have all the information you want as timely as you want. So I just wanted to clarify. So we've discussed sending out, and we have been sending out the board packets. Generally, we're trying to do that a week ahead of time. Is that sufficient for you? Is a week ahead of time to review it? And I know we have had discussions about just doing it all electronically, but are any of you still interested in having mailed copies? If you're printing your own anyways, we'd be happy to, print it and send it to you as well. So I just wanted to clarify a couple of those items.
Board members, what's your pleasure? I had the conversation with staff last week relative to this issue, and I'm okay and comfortable with receiving the information electronically in advance. And we recognize that we can't do it too far in advance because the staff has to have time to make final preparations for the applications and information that they provide to us. But from my perspective, I think I'm becoming more adept at being able to look at things and electronically. And if that saves the division being able to do that. But my only reservation in that is when it comes time for the meeting, as they have provided today, a summarized copy of the board book, I think is still important to be able to have that hard copy in front of us as we conduct the meetings and transact business. But that would be my perspective, of just sending out electronic versions and then having copies here, for the meeting. Any other comments?
This is Blaine. I'm good electronically.
This is Norman. This is Charles. I prefer a hard copy, just as you're saying. Like right now in the meeting, I'm bouncing back and forth between the board book and the camera of you all there. I'm sure if I were there and had a hard copy, that would help me there for taking notes. But I did okay reading online. I did that, and I had a couple other meetings this week, so I've had a lot of reading time. But hard copy is nice.
This is Norman. I have a little bit of a hard time with electronic and reading it and whatnot and getting ready for the board meeting. So
Okay. Yeah, we'd be happy to send you a hard copy.
So it sounds like we have kind of a mixed
Okay.
options there. And maybe that, I hate to put more work on staff, but for those that would prefer to have hard copy, and I understand the comment that Charles is making relative to, remotely. If you don't have the hard copy in front of you, it's hard to bounce back and forth between your Zoom version and the board discussions as well. And so maybe that's just something, if we know in advance that someone is going to be attending virtually, and I recognize that that's not always easy to know as well, but if they were attending remotely, we could send them hard copy for those of us that are in person, we could just have a summarized copy here and available to us. I don't know, that's kind of all over the page.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I think, I'm not sure, but most of us should be able to have a copy of that on our phones. And so, even if we are doing it remotely, there's still a possibility of being able to communicate over the computer and stuff, but still have the agenda in front of us on our phones. I'm okay electronically, but when we're here like this, just like you mentioned, it's nice to have a hard copy sitting on the desk.
Okay, well, I will intend to have Lindsay and Joel kind of follow up individually with you to make sure we understood each of your individual requests. But I do like your idea of, we know someone's going to be electronic, that we can get them a hard copy if they would like that. One other item of note, just as information to the board, traditionally, we went through an effort where we collected newspaper articles in our office, cut them all out, put them into the board book for you. We haven't done that for some time, and I'm just wanted to follow up with the board if that's something that you guys liked and you would like us to make sure to do that, or if you don't feel that's necessary, that's fine too. I just wanted to get the board's take on that.
Board members, any feedback on that question? I guess my comment would be it's been useful information, but rather than going to the time and effort of making copies of all of the articles, maybe perhaps just a page that would list the article in a link where we could go to it.
Yeah, so our only...
If we chose to do so, but that might be difficult too.
We're happy to do that. My only concern with that is that sometimes, depending on the news outfit, you get 1 or 3 articles, and if you hit that max and you try to click on a link, you're not able to access it. So that was just part of my concern there, but happy to do that, and potentially maybe we could just download the articles and send a PDF of them potentially, if the board missed it, finds it useful, anything like that.
I like the articles. It kind of helps keep us up. But by the same token, if staff time can be used more productively, if there are things going on that are important that need to be addressed, I think they need to be addressed before that is.
This is Blaine. I agree with everything that's been said. To me, it's been beneficial in the sense of water is a very political thing, and just being able to review different areas of the state, some of the different things. I found that I've actually, to me, it's been beneficial. I agree with what Wayne's saying. We don't want to take away from something else, but I personally think it has been beneficial.
Sounds good.
There again, I don't know that we answered the question, but at least have some discussion relative
I'm
to
hearing
it.
from most people that they find it beneficial, and then we'll work with our staff to figure out kind of what's the easiest mechanism to do that, to gather the information and provide it to the board.
Okay, thank you.
And that's all I had, Mr. Chair.
And that's all you have? Okay, well.
Joel, sorry, Mr.
Go ahead.
Chair. Did you want to bring up the board meetings and schedule?
Yeah, if I might, and also just a couple of ideas we had. Shalane and I were talking about the same issue of the board book, and I appreciate Wayne when it said, you could be on your screen, but also have it on your phone. I realize the phones are kind of small. We wondered if maybe getting the board members tablets would be something that's helpful. The one advantage that we're seeing, and I've talked with Lindsay about this, to having the board folder being sent electronically is it allows flexibility when we have last minute updates. When something changes, we can say, well, we already mailed the folders a week ago. but if it's something electronic, whether it be an email or Shalane mentioned that there's a Kindle tablet where you can, a PDF will just show up and you'll see it on there and you can click on it and say, oh, this is the updated board folder. And you now know this is the current one. It doesn't have to be Kindle. It could be a Samsung tablet variety, but it's something we could think about if board members think that'd be helpful. You'd know what you have is the most current. I realize, as Norm said, sometimes technology just has its issues and it may not be the end all meet all, but something to think about. And as we are following up with you, maybe you can let us know if you think that would be something that would be helpful, and we could pursue that, because I think there is something helpful about being able to have the Zoom on the screen, but then also have something in hand, whether it's a hard copy or another device that has the reports on it. Something to think about. And then I have not had time to research this yet, but I know for a number of years we held 7 board meetings a year, but for the last 2 or 3 years we've been holding 8 board meetings a year. And it's something that I just noticed and thought maybe I'd mention. I think that's also one of the issues we're running into, of just being able to prepare a board folder in time, because by the time we're holding the one meeting, the reports for the next one are either already due or they're due the week following, because with the board meeting, trying to hold 8 in a year makes them spaced so much more closely. And we used to do 7 a year, and I think it provided a little bit more time to put a board folder together and get it sent out. So something I thought I'd mention, if the board had a preference on 7 or 8, it's something I think we'll take a look at internally. But does the board have any thoughts or concerns?
Mr. Chairman, this is Jim
Go ahead.
Lemon.
Go
Just
ahead.
a couple
Go
of
ahead,
comments. Today, as I'm doing this one remotely, I've got my iPad right in front of my computer. So I'm watching the meeting going on the iPad, and I'm following the agenda on my computer. So it's not a problem where I've got one set in front of the other instead of having to switch back and forth. I do think that on the other subject, that 7 meetings is better, because sometimes they are close enough that it's hard to get things on and meet the schedule that we ask them to have it in ahead. And I would think maybe going back to the 7, I've been on there for both ways, but I think the 7's a little better for giving the time frame to have things ready for the meeting. That's my comments. That's all.
Thank you, Jim. Any other board member comments? From my perspective, Charles, go ahead.
You know, I kind of agree with Jim, and I know in the last year or two, we've had situations come up where we've had not enough agenda items to hold a meeting, and we would cancel a meeting. So it would be better to have 7 full agendas than 8 and trying to decide whether to postpone a meeting or something like that. So yeah, I have similar feelings.
I would agree with what Charles and Jim have said. On the other hand, I didn't know that there was a time when there were only 7 meetings versus 8. So that's, but I know from a staff perspective, I'm sure it puts a lot of pressure on them to be able to meet the timelines. The only question I would have is, are we meeting the needs as a board in providing that service to the industry to be able to implement their projects in a timely manner? Is there any, there probably wouldn't be any significant change in only meeting 7 times a year versus 8 times a year in order to meet that need. But and then my other question was, is there any statutory requirement relative to the number of times the board has to meet?
Yeah, I think the impact would be a matter of a few weeks. You know, for a sponsor, if it was 7 instead of 8, it might mean a couple of week impact that way. So I agree. I don't think there's a huge impact there, but I will check if there's anything in statute. I don't think there is, but I'll check.
Okay. So having that discussion then, would that be something that would be considered for the remainder of the meetings this year for 2022? Or is that something you're looking to implement in 2023? Maybe you haven't, don't have a recommendation.
It's something that I just noticed this year, and I realized the timing's unfortunate because we already have a full approved schedule for next year. So I was anticipating it probably wouldn't affect the 2022 schedule, but as we prepare for 2023, looking at whether we did 7 or 8 that year. That's my thinking. We could obviously modify the schedule for this year, but it's already kind of been approved.
Yeah, I would.
Well, and this is
be for 2023. Go ahead, Shalane.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to say, just looking at the schedule for this year, I would think that we might need these simply because of the addition of the ARPA funds this year. I think we may need one meeting that's almost solely dedicated to determining where the ARPA funds go. So I'm not sure that we could cut out a meeting this year. But I mean, that is one thing that, as was mentioned in the past, we haven't had much on the agenda. And so we say, hey, we'll just wait. And we canceled, I think last year it was the May meeting was canceled or something. But, you know, I just think at that point in time, it's kind of not necessarily on people's construction preparing schedule. So, but I'd be happy to look at that for future years. I think right now for this year, we'd probably plan to keep it as has been approved.
Okay, thank you. Joel, any more?
Nope, that was it. Thank you.
Okay.
We're good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, with that then, board members, do you have any items to bring up in the briefing meeting? And as per the agenda, are we able to do that?
Yes, there's an other items to discuss. So
Okay.
that is open.
So are there any other items to discuss before we adjourn? Charles, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and board members and staff. I had a conversation with Joel Ferry, representative from my area, about Great Salt Lake issues. And without jeopardizing the current operations we have within the Division of Water Resources, I suggested to him that in this crisis mode we almost seem to be in with Great Salt Lake, I wondered why we are not enhancing weather modification similar to what they're doing on the upper Colorado River Basin and or in Idaho. And he seemed to be not very knowledgeable about the program that we're using presently for cloud seeding. But I suggested to him that it may be of some value to help with the preservation of Great Salt Lake. And I don't know if I got any traction with him or not, but I have the understanding that we don't want to see something else within the division being sacrificed for additional funds in that area. So we did have that discussion as well. I just thought I would bring up what I had discussed with him. So that's all.
Thank you, Charles. Any other items? There is one item I failed to mention at the beginning of the meeting, and that is just the way we'll conduct the meetings this year. Again, as we're required to do, I think, follow Robert's Rules of Order, where we're meeting some in person and some virtually. We'll need to conduct a roll call. Well, for those that are meeting here in person, we can record the votes on the motions just by voice vote, and we can acknowledge that, either a yay or nay. For those that are participating virtually, and one change that we will make this year is that Blaine ask for those participating virtually to record their voice vote rather than the chairman doing that. We'll turn to Candace Hasenjaeger, who also by statute, she's the director of the Division of Water Resources, but she also serves as secretary to the division or to the board. And she will conduct that roll call vote for those that are participating virtually when we need to take action on a motion. So that's just a couple of little housekeeping changes that we'll make. And if there are no other items to bring up at this time, then we can entertain a motion to adjourn until the board meeting at 1 o'clock. Does anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to adjourn. Those present, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Candace, would you ask for those virtually? We'll give it a practice here
Okay.
on an adjournment motion.
Sounds good. Charles Holmgren,
I vote aye to adjourn.
Jim Lemon,
Aye.
and Blaine Ibsen.
I vote aye.
Okay. That's all I believe that's on there. I don't think Juliet's joined us yet, correct? Okay.
Okay, thank you. We'll stand adjourned then until 1 o'clock.
See you at 1.
Thanks.